6 o'clock then. I declare open this special meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Chair Quillisi,
Here?
Vice Chair Nolan,
Here.
Commissioner Lottis,
Here.
Commissioner Trent,
Here.
one vacancy.
One vacancy. And good evening to our city attorney. Okay, Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Chair Nolan, would you lead us, please?
Yes. I'm waiting for the flag. Oh, I can see it. Okay, from where you are. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Public communications. I'm overwhelmed with the amount of public communications we have this evening. At last count, some 24 emails on both sides of the question on item 3. Do we have any others who would wish to speak in public communications on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent item, the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission, August 18th, 2021. Any commissioners have refinements to the minutes? Yes, Commissioner Lottis. Oh, you're on mute, ma'am.
On mute.
I tried to unmute. There we go.
There you go.
Didn't click properly. Okay, it's the very last sentence before the end. It's just a grammatical thing. I think we need to say the commission was in deliberation when the technical issue interrupted the meeting.
Instead of were.
Yeah. Very minor.
Is there a change you want to make there?
It should say the commission was, not the commission were.
Or the commissioners were, yes, okay. One way or the other.
The commission was in deliberation.
The commission was, okay.
That's all.
Well, I'm happy with that change. Thank you for catching it. I must have been thinking British when I read it. They would say the commission were.
Mm-hmm.
Any other changes or adds? Very good. How about a motion to approve then?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. My motion is that we approve the Ojai Planning Commission minutes dated August 18th, 2021. With the
Terrific.
one change on that last sentence, the commission was rather than the commission were in deliberation.
Yep.
The technical issue interrupted the meeting.
Do we have a second? I'll second for discussion purposes. Any discussion of the motion to approve the minutes as amended? All right, Sherry, would you call the roll, please?
Quillisi,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes?
Lottis,
Yes.
Trent.
Yes.
Very good. Disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Vice Chair Nolan, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm familiar with the sites, and I had no ex parte contacts.
Okay. Commissioner Lottis?
Me also. I am familiar with the site and I've had no ex parte contacts. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Trent?
Yeah, I visited the sites. No ex parte contacts.
Very good. I walked around the site, couldn't get inside to look around, but walked all 4 sides of the proposed El Roblar and had no ex parte contacts. Thank you. Item 2, a public hearing on a CUP and DRP on the Rancho Inn. Locus, would you explain to us, please?
Yeah, so staff's recommendation, as you recall, this item was continued from the August 18th meeting due to technical difficulties. The staff is recommending that the item be continued date specific or date certain to October 6th. That'll give the applicant and working with staff the opportunity to work through some of those conditions of approval, as well as a recent code compliance concern that's been raised that staff is looking into currently and code compliance is looking into currently.
And I would note that that code compliance issue occurred after the continuation of the last meeting.
Correct.
After what?
After the October 18th,
Oh, after.
or I'm
the-
sorry, August
or ac-
18th.
After the August 18th meeting, yes. Right, okay. So the recommended action by staff is to continue this item to October 6th? Is that okay with the rest of the commissioners?
Yes?
Do we need a motion to do that? We
Yes.
do, okay. Vice Chair Nolan?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we continue this item, conditional use permit CUP 21-001 and design review permit DRP 21-010. And I noticed we don't have a date. So are we saying to continue to a date uncertain at this point?
No, this
No.
is to a date
October
certain,
6th.
October 6th is.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Oh, I see that. It's right in front of me. I apologize. Okay, continue the item to October 6th, 2021.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
Second,
a second, thank you, Commissioner. Any discussion? Then Sherry, please call the roll.
Quilisi,
Yes?
Nolan,
Yes?
Lottis,
yes.
Trent. Trent, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item 3 at DRP 21003 and other stuff with regard to the Oaks at Ojai to be renamed the El Roblar Hotel. Lucas, would you explain what's going on here?
Right. So there has been some information that has recently, that staff has recently become available to staff. And because that, staff is recommending, instead of hearing the item tonight, to continue the item based on that recent information. That's really related to the parking situation, which would potentially change or modify the overall site for the hotel as proposed. In talking with the applicant, they are agreeable to an October 6th date, which would be date specific or date certain.
And just on this point, I would recommend that the commission withhold any comments regarding the project for now, as the design, and no, sorry, not the design, the site plan and the parking are going to change, and so I think there'll be changes to those conditions within the on October 6th. So I would recommend that it would be premature to comment at the moment because there'll be changes that are likely to be addressed. So.
Right, okay. Once again, the recommendation is continuation to a date certain, October 6th. Vice Chair Nolan?
Sure, I'll go ahead and make another motion that we continue the design review permit DRP 21-003. I just want to make sure I got everything else in there. I think I did. To October 6th,
Very good.
2021.
Is there a second to that motion?
I do have a quick question. So this will be October 6th will be for both the El Roblar and the Rancho?
Correct.
That is correct.
As it stands,
Okay.
could be a long meeting.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we give them both their due justice.
Yeah.
Right, I agree.
Okay.
And so, I don't know how to say this. So if we have other concerns that might involve additional work, evaluation. That's not up for, that's not included in the parking issue.
Well, there are aspects of the project that are going to change when it's brought back on the October 6th,
Okay.
including parking. So I would suggest that perhaps it's best to hold those comments till October 6th. But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
So,
We need a second.
well, for discussion
I'll second.
purposes, I'll second the motion to continue item 3 to October 6th. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Trent, did you raise your hand?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm good. Thanks.
Then let's call the question. Sherry?
Quilisi,
Yes.
Nolan,
Yes?
Lottis,
Yes.
Trent.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Again, I want to compliment the people of Ojai for the amount of comment that we have so far on this project. And as things change in what the applicant asks for, I would advise the public to wait until shortly before October 6th. There will be a new packet and new information for you to analyze and comment upon, for or against, and we should have a lively session on the 6th. Okay, let's move on. We have a discussion item, the general plan update, land use map discussion. Lucas?
So this item was continued from the August 18th meeting. And really the discussion piece for that was really kind of a review, kind of have an organic discussion about the general plan update and the general plan land use map, and then the actual specific pieces within that land use element. At this point, if the commission has any questions or comments on it, we can certainly have that discussion. Staff's actually recommending that this be continued, although it's identifying October 6th that could get pushed to the subsequent meeting as well, seeing that we do have two fairly heavy items.
October 20th.
Yeah, that would be going up for the 6th.
That might be a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since it
I would
is
go along
a
with that.
discussion item, do we need a motion to continue it?
No, not for a discussion item.
Okay.
Public hearing, yes.
Well, unless there are any objections among the commissioners, then we'll continue this item to October 20th.
I'm good with that.
Ditto.
Very good. Got a message from our city council liaison, before I forget again. Mr. Wyrick, he is tied up in a Casitas Water Board meeting and thus is unable to attend tonight to this meeting. But presumably he'll be back again next week and thereafter.
It's a good place
Okay,
to
well,
be.
let's go on to item 5 then, priorities of the Planning Commission and community development. If you'd bring us up to date on that, Lucas?
Yes, so this item is not being continued. We have a discussion piece for several topics to focus on for this upcoming year. Those topics really kind of molded themselves from the joint meeting with City Council on August 24th. Here we have, I would say, 4 items that are actually numbered here. We have the general plan, land use element, and then merging it with the affordable housing goals and policies. Number 2 being the formula business ordinance, 3 being Title 10 update, and 4 being the tree ordinance water efficiency landscape guidelines. Those are really kind of the discussion pieces that came from that joint meeting that we had 2 weeks ago, I want to say, in terms of where we're at.
It was the 24th.
Yeah.
Yes, about 2 weeks ago.
Just about 2 weeks ago. And I'm opening it up for really kind of discussion. as to the numbering, one, the numbering, and two, the items that are listed here. I know at one point the commission had asked if there was a priorities or a work plan that we had from years past, and I was able to dredge something up from 2019. If you'd like, we can talk about the 2019 first and start checking boxes, or we can go through
I like that idea because we've done some
checking
of that
boxes.
work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there was a report that was put out on December 18th at a regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting 2019. In that, it had the subject heading of priorities of the Planning Commission and Community Development Department. As a discussion, there were 3 items that were part of a joint meeting or in preparation for a joint meeting for January 14th of 2020. Those included the what's referred to as a creative work program, which encompassed tree ordinance, vehicle and bicycle parking, and council's long-term visions and goals. The second item was vision for affordable housing. Obviously, this is all before we started working on the housing element and the general plan update. And then the third one is the general plan update. And in terms of creating a schedule, consider the global warming topics for the related aspect, and then asking the general question, what is the role of the Planning Commission? Those were really kind of the crux of the items that were discussed during the joint meeting on January 14th of 2020. And then it goes on to have some examples of recent projects and focus areas that include, for instance, visions to the zoning code for fences, walls, and hedges. I think we all know that box has been checked. Animal keeping, this commission debated and put forward, I would say, their best foot for recommendation to City Council. I think that box is checked. The tree ordinance, or Tree City USA designation. The tree ordinance necessarily hasn't been discussed, but the Tree City USA, we are very much a Tree City USA once again. I saw some of the members of this commission at the most recent dedication in terms of celebrating. It was either Earth Day or
I think it was Earth Day.
It was Earth Day. Was it? Okay, thank you.
And thanks to Vice Chair Nolan, our lead on loving trees.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Another piece to this in terms of recent projects and focus areas included design guidelines, map, and policy review. That one I'm not 100% familiar with. I know we do have design guidelines, and all those design guidelines are kind of mapped out throughout.
Yeah. I think we have 4 sets of design guidelines.
Right.
And we kind of impinged on them a bit when we talked about vision and guiding principles for the general plan update, but it's not something that we've gone through in detail.
Mm-hmm.
I do recall we talked about being more flexible about land use in the C1 zone, which certainly is a part of that design guideline, I think. Vice Chair Nolan, a comment?
Yeah, just a comment on that design guideline map. If I remember correctly, I know we have design guidelines for certain areas in the city.
That's right.
East
Did make
Ojai
some
Avenue,
changes there, didn't
downtown, and then part of, I guess that would be like the west side of Ojai Avenue, heading out of town towards, Ventura. We don't have anything and so if I remember the discussion correctly, we talked about it. Could there be some kind of a comparison or an update where we can actually maybe interweave some of those design guidelines into other areas in the community or in the commercial zone or VMU zone as needed? So it was kind of making, yes, we do have separate areas, but could we have kind of a general comprehensive design guide?
We've started on that, but maybe not finished it.
Yeah,
I do
I hope I
recall,
explained that correctly, but I think it's a good
that,
idea.
That Lucas
Yeah.
helped us rationalize the design guidelines to the extent that there aren't any areas that now have 2 or 3 different sets of design guidelines applying.
Well, that was part of it, and then other areas that maybe didn't have any that should or could.
Okay, so I think we probably need to circle back around to that.
Yep.
Title 10 update, we've made a lot of progress. I don't know if it has been presented to City Council yet, but I know we have a ways to go. We have other changes and certainly some policy questions to cover.
Yes,
Title
and
10.
internally, we're actually working on that currently. Staff is working on that,
Okay.
so that's progressing.
And revisions to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, it seems to me that we have done some of that. I don't know
Some of
whether
that
we
was
need
done
to
in
come back around to it or not.
Some of that was done in 2020, and there will always be. It seems like state continues to come back with revisions to ADU ordinances, so there's likely to be ongoing revisions to that
Well, I
just over
think,
time.
didn't the council already preempt a part of our discussion by declaring tiny homes on wheels a variety of ADU?
It's one of the potential aspects within the toolbox of
Yeah.
accessory structures.
So we probably need to look at that again.
Right. I like the toolbox like concept because I don't think there is one answer, and I think having a multiple or a variety of possible options, that all meet, that get approved and they're in the code, is a good way to go. Different lifestyles, different incomes, different wants, different needs.
So worthy of another look.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lucas, I kind of got in
No,
your
it's
way
okay.
there. You were carrying
It's
us
okay.
through
It's by committee here too tonight. So there are pending topics that at that time were signed by council, and those included the general plan update, housing, adaptive reuse, which is certainly a planning term.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And those were the three that were, it looks like, topics assigned by council. General plan update, we're in the thick of it right now.
Yeah.
Housing, we're certainly in the thick of it.
Yeah, where do we stand on that? Have we heard back from HCD on anything yet?
I'd prefer to hold that to comments at the very end, but yeah, I have an
Good.
update on that for sure.
Let's do that.
And then
Adaptive reuse, I think we need to decide what we think it means. Unless there is a formal definition under the law or common use among planning departments in
planning profession.
other
Yeah,
cities.
there certainly is. I think that's something. It looks like a pending topic that was assigned by council, although we didn't talk about it during joint. We were kind of focused on other areas. This one feels like it's either fallen off the radar or just isn't on the wagon anymore. But if it's a pleasure of the commission, I could certainly bring something back in the future to have a discussion to see where it goes.
Sometime after October 6th.
Sometime in the future.
I think we're going to be busy between now and then.
Yeah, I could schedule.
I'd
We
be
could schedule that.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners about things we ought to be doing? Things we might add to our own to-do list?
So I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Lottis?
So when on the Title 10 update, we have the commission both with Community Development Director Siebert and the previous director. We did get into some deep dive discussions and in a number of areas. So is that what you're referring to, that we would go back and kind of
Well,
finish the discussion on some of those areas? Is
I
that what we're talking
think we
about?
need to finish some of those deep dives, certainly, and there are other areas that are more policy questions than errata corrections and
Right.
and that
That's what I'm
kind of
talking
thing.
about. I mean, we did some deep dives on more policy-related issues and
Right.
things that seemed to be unclear, areas that really needed more clarification, thinking through to make sure that there's a sense of integration with all the processes and so forth. So,
Okay, and I know Lucas and I have been through a lot of paragraphs in Title 10 on item 5, okay?
I had a quick question.
Please, go ahead.
Sorry. I know we're going over Title 10, but I was just curious about Title 9. Who goes over Title 9?
That's the Building Appeals Board formal responsibility. And we did
Okay.
make some changes to Title IX, approved obviously by City Council, both when I was on that board and after I left it and came to the Planning Commission.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
it has to do with building standards, as you would imagine.
Got it. And the only reason I bring that up is I was looking at what the Climate Committee had sent to us back in August 24th regarding those 9 items that they'd like us to look at with the general plan update. And I was just curious on how we could incorporate that into the general plan and maybe into the Title IX as well, into the building code. And I don't know if we would need to get the BAB involved with that or how that would work, but that was just a question.
I think we'd probably all have to review that list of 9 items, but my first scan of it said some of those things are appropriate for the Planning Commission to consider, others are appropriate for the Building Appeals Board to consider.
Absolutely,
And
correct. So I was just,
they have a lead staff member, the city building official, like we have Lucas.
Right.
got it. Okay.
but that said, the policies come first, and that's our oversight, is to review the policy statements and decide where they belong in the general plan, if they do belong, and whether they're complete, whether we should expand, or exactly what we should include in the general plan as policy statements.
I agree.
And along with that, in terms of the topic number 1, general plan update, in fact, I was just looking at the general plan tonight. I was looking at it in terms of some of the historic preservation policies. And I think in many cases, our existing policies are like not sufficient. And this is where I think we really need to spend some time really thinking through exactly what we want to say in terms of our policy positions for the next 20 years. And I think that we really need to think about filling in where we have incomplete or statements or things that we just don't quite say enough about. And that includes the policies on climate.
Okay. Well, let's get some of these big rocks out of the road, and then maybe by that time we will have heard back from HCD on the housing element, and then we can move on to other elements of the general plan and discuss them in turn.
Good.
Okay? Any other comments or questions for staff on priorities of the Planning Commission? I think we need to kind of combine these 2 lists and keep them in front of us as we go from meeting to meeting, and when we are out of the urgent business, then start picking up some of these longer term items.
Yeah, what I could do with this list, I'm sorry. I think Vice Chair Nolan, I think you had a question. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I just had a question. Unfortunately, our joint meeting is only an hour, and it only happens occasionally. And I felt like it was a good meeting, But there were a lot of things that we never really got an answer, and nor would I expect something in an hour. But like for the housing one, I heard some individual comments from city council, but as far as like a collective, this is the direction we're going, or this is the vision we see, we didn't get it. So it still kind of leaves us up in the air, other than the fact that I remember saying to them, yes, we have to do what's required, with our housing element by the state, demonstrate the range of numbers that we have, the properties, etc. But that's one thing, that's one part of housing. But what about other things where we have the toolbox that we talked about earlier, where we have things in our code where we're creative with housing, something that's outside of the typical norms of the housing element. And I'm not sure, this has kind of been an ongoing thing year after year after year. The 1 hour, we don't seem to get an answer. Like I said, I don't necessarily expect it, but then nothing really happens until we have the next meeting, then we do the 1 hour. So it's kind of like this continuous loop. And I'm not saying this to be negative, it's just more kind of the time crunch issue that we never really get into it. And
I
don't know
agree
about
with
anyone
you.
else, but it would sure be wonderful to kind of get the vision that we asked for.
Yeah, I agree. And,
Yeah.
Oops, my grandson's coming in. Can you close the door? I'm taking care of my grandchildren. Okay. Okay. Good night.
We should all be so lucky.
So sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I actually have a specific question for Lucas and maybe Nikhil. So, yes, we've done we're doing, finalizing what the state requires of us. Are we do we have the ability to, push beyond what the state allows and, do the things that are actually for our community in terms of trying to be creative and really thinking hard about how we could actually be proactive and effective in terms of maybe getting some affordable housing into our community? Do we have that ability? Because, we don't want the state to say, oh, no, you can't do X, Y, and Z, because it somehow would conflict with what we're doing to check their boxes.
We absolutely have that ability. Once the reason we're doing this now is the way we're doing it now is because we need the state to approve our housing element. But once the housing element's been approved, we can make further changes to the element. We can do we can revise our element. Obviously, every revision needs to be run past HCD, but we can go beyond what the state wants.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
That is encouraging. I love it.
Yeah, one example that came up so many times before the first draft of the housing element went in was the SPL overlay.
Right.
And I don't know if you've heard anything from anybody else wanting to be a part of that party, but the opportunity is certainly there for anyone who owns property within the city. And those are things that we might consider when we get around to talking about affordable housing, again, beyond what we are required to do by the state. And I think it's a very useful thing to do. Would be good for us to lead some discussion within the city on the topic of affordable housing and where it might be in the city.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay? Anything else on item 5? Then
Wait a second.
let's move to item 6.
Wait a second.
The continued item from July and August.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot there was a speaker card submitted by Mr. Miley. This is for Item 4 or item 5?
Bill
Five.
Miley, that was, sir, that was item 5, priorities of the Planning Commission and the community development.
Very
I
good.
think
Go
that's
ahead,
what we were
sir.
discussing. Something that we've talked about in the past, which has to do with parking. Maybe it's there, but I didn't hear it. I'd like to see it again come up. Parking, look, maybe even an ad hoc group from the community, looking at parking now, parking for the near future, parking for the long term, and then especially looking at businesses with large numbers of employees, like where do they park? And specifically, the issue of acquisition of land for city parking places, and then the consideration of a multi-story parking structure in town where the first story would be below grade, which would maximize the footprint. So that's that item. And then I'd like to make a supporting comment on Commissioner Nolan's comment on the joint meetings. I watched them, I like them, but I agree that they kind of end up with, what are we going to do next? And you might consider a 1.5 hour meeting where the first hour is general discussion and the second half hour is led by the chair, focused on items that we agree on that should be focused and looked about for the next year. Anyway, that's my thought. They're good. I think they could be better by maybe adding a half hour. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right. Lucas, let's go on to item 6.
So item 6 is a discussion item. It's continuing a matter off calendar, so the draft formula business regulations. Staff's recommending to continue this item for future planning commission meeting off calendar to allow staff to continue and further the research of the formula business ordinance. As this commission will recall, council has extended the moratorium, which gives us additional time, just to give the commission and the community that's listening in a little bit of an update. Staff has reached out to various municipalities, including the city of San Francisco, to understand their formula business ordinance and how they arrived at the ordinance that they have currently in place. In addition to that, we're reaching out and trying to find a local, I don't want to call it a local expert, but an expert on formula business and e-commerce types of implementation. So we're currently looking into that and trying to find a source that would fit the mold and potentially could come here and speak on that item. So that's ongoing currently. And we're waiting to hear back on some of those items. So.
And when it's a discussion item, noticing is not required. I'm not even sure it would be if we had a public hearing on this, because there's no particular venue that's called out. Is that correct?
No, the noticing for an item like this, because of the sheer number and the impact to the community, it requires us not necessarily to do like a 300 or 500 radius, but we end up doing something in the paper.
Do something in the paper because it would, if it's a public hearing, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's move on to informational items, director decisions, item 7 in your binder. Any questions for staff on any of those decisions?
I just have one question. It's probably been asked before. So on this, where somebody's working in the drip line of 8 Coast Live Oaks to install a rock wall, obviously the rock wall is probably optional. Maybe nice to have, but, probably not required. Maybe it is. So they would have filed an arborist report, is that right? But is there somebody that actually then continues to oversee the actual working? Do they check in with the work that's actually being done and making sure that the protections are in place?
You're talking
Or
in the
is it just a report filed? Is that it? And that's the end of it?
Right, it's a report filed, and then there's typically recommendations that go along with that. The interesting thing, I know to your point, Commissioner Lottis, fences aren't required in this city at any point in time. They are a luxury, and for all-encompassing purposes, every property seems to have a fence, at least on one of the borders of their property. It's just the way of life.
Yeah.
It's a luxury, I would say, to a certain degree. In terms of the tree report, there is a report that we require for working within the drip line. Oh,
Okay.
that's a good
I mean,
point. We actually go out and do an inspection as well as a part of the final for
Oh,
these as well.
Yeah, once the work is done.
Yep.
Right. But it's probably not that's going to be a building guy.
Vice
No,
Chair.
it's
Not
not.
in the
It's
tree
not
guy.
building. It's planning. We have a planner that goes out and
Okay.
performs the final.
Vice Chair Nolan, a comment?
Now, just a question in regards to the tree report, and using this one property as an example, the 8 coast live oaks, and just install a rock wall. So depending if the wall's a retaining wall or if it's a garden wall or what the height of the wall is, it's going to have a footing. And I'm assuming, but I guess I'm asking, in the tree report, Lucas, did it include protective measures? Did it include oversight by an arborist? And, if the installer hits a root, usually typically bigger than 1 inch, sometimes 2 inch, that you need to call the arborist, or there's a special way that you should be cutting it.
Yeah, and those conditions sometimes lead to hand digging and working around those roots rather than cutting those roots, depending on where it's at.
Right.
If it tends to be on the edge of a drip line, you're not going to tend. I mean, Commissioner Nolan, I don't know I'm telling you this, but you would know best. Typically along the edge, and I think everybody here kind of understands that as well. You're not going to have roots as large as you would if it was closer to the base. So those are conditions absolutely that are folded in and followed through with as well.
And is that I'm just asking you generally, because, you're getting reports from different arborists, obviously. Are they following general guidelines by the city that, check boxes, so to speak? Protective fencing if you need it, signage if you need it, oversight by an arborist, how to make the cuts, et cetera, et cetera. Is that kind of a normal, or does it vary by arborist?
Each arborist is a little bit unique, and you tend to see consistent regulations or mitigation that follow their results of their arborist report, depending on from arborist to arborist.
But the site conditions can do it. But I guess where I'm going with this is because I know we had the tree ordinance on our previous item, along with landscape guidelines, mainly from the, how it's affecting our climate and the environment and what have you. But I will say part of the reason that I would like to see us go through the tree ordinances, just to get an update on the requirements. And so there's consistency when any arborist files a report. Yes, the trees are going to be different, the site's going to be different, and you have to put that into the mix. But there are some consistent things and ways to do them that they all should be following. And that's what my question generally was. Do you see that coming in consistently, or is it just very random and everybody's kind of doing their own thing as far as the arborists go?
I wouldn't say that it's random by any stretch of the imagination. There's some one-off scenarios, but for the most part, there is some consistency. I think if we were to look at any edges of the city or even in the heart of the city, if there's work being done within the drip line of an oak, you're going to see fairly consistent conditions.
Okay, good. And I know
like I said
Sherry
before,
just
there is those one-off scenarios that do happen from time to time.
I mean, we're so prescriptive, for example, with what am I going to say, the Indian artifacts or
right.
archaeology, is it? I think we could be thinking of that a more kind of prescriptive list of or a consistency
Standards, yeah.
when we go to do the tree ordinance. So
I will say Sherry did emailed out the report just now, and it's very thorough. I'm talking,
Okay.
but I'm scrolling through it, and it's
Okay.
very well done, and
Okay.
it was done quite well. But I think I was just asking in general, just for the consistency, because
Right.
having that consistency can help ensure that we're protecting our urban forest.
good.
Yeah. So, but this one was done, like I said.
I think you raise an interesting question, and Lucas, are the provisions that are standard language in DRPs and CUPs and that sort of thing about discovery of historical artifacts or prehistorical artifacts, are those also part of the paperwork that accompanies a tree permit?
Yes, if I recall correctly. Standard, there's a
Section
standard.
in the tree ordinance that says an arborist report must contain. We check that ordinance against their report, and if they're missing something, we send it back. And
Okay.
So from a
require.
processing standpoint, yes,
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
yeah.
So the same requirements then, in effect, wind up on as a part of the approval of a tree permit.
Yeah, and to Commissioner Lottis and Commissioner Nolan's point, looking at standardized conditions maybe boiled into the ordinance itself, that's something certainly through the tree ordinance we can take a
Yeah.
closer look at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, because some of the arborists
Would
like this
say,
one. I
from a
think,
personal
it's
point
very
of
thorough.
view, that my wife and I go by this particular rock wall 3 or 4 times a week as we do our daily walks. And the footing itself was in place for at least a couple of weeks before any rock work started. And I presume that the city did its inspections at that time.
Yeah, and actually this one came up as a code case. They started doing the construction prior to getting the permit.
Ooh.
So it was a code case. I don't want to go into too much detail on that one, but
Okay.
it was resolved, obviously. And they got the permit.
Good.
Okay, any other questions for staff on the tree permits or the sign permit? We do have a member of the public who wishes to speak on item 7. Please come forward, sir.
Thank you, Bill Miley. I'd like to speak about the oak trees. In about 1978, we bought a house over in Golden West with I was told, a 200-year-old oak tree. They were still doing some plumbing on the property before we moved in. And one day we went over there when we found a 4-foot trench dug all the way around the drip line. So I called an arborist, and they said the best I could do was to water it a lot. And in 4 years, it was dead. That was really disturbing. So I wanted to ask, adding to the commissioner's comments, I've not looked at the drip ordinance, but it seems to me that putting a footing in is a real problem. Putting any kind of plumbing pipes in is a real problem, where you dig down. So the question would be, is it clear that they can't dig further down into the soil more than so many inches until they start to hit roots? Or is it clear that there's a percentage of root that can't be removed or can be removed, or no, that can't be removed at all? What about cutting back the tree crown so the drip line gets shorter, circumference-wise? Or maybe more importantly, is to look at permits that have been given and where the drip line construction has been completed, following up over 5 years to see how it impacted the trees. Because it might have been a couple of years and maybe 5 years later they're dead. So I think this is really worth looking at a little bit more. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I think that's an interesting point. Perhaps if the code compliance officer runs out of other things to do, taking up some cold cases like tree permits 5 years out might be a useful exercise. If we if we could, from that, determine whether or not we have enough restrictions on working around trees.
I mean, that's something we can look into, but I can tell you right now, code compliance is not short on work.
Okay.
And it's unfortunate because there are properties in town and, you know, elsewhere where 5, 10, 12 years later, the tree that was near the foundation or what have you ends up dying. There's a couple I know of downtown right now that are
Yeah.
in that situation. It's unfortunate, but yeah, whatever we can do to prevent that is a good
But
thing.
if we take up the tree ordinance again, it could be useful to look into some of these details, like how deep and how close, and how much roots could be taken out without nominally harming a tree. As well as, should there be any other protected trees besides oaks and sycamores?
Correct.
Right.
Okay, well, let's move on to item 8, the Planning Commission tentative agenda. Lucas, this is your baby.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the comprehensive sign program, which is 407 West Ojai Avenue, that is definitely coming before this commission on the 15th, and so is the DE 21-12, which is Pinion. It's that pizzeria at 423 East Ojai Avenue. That's the old location where Jersey Mike's was located at. So
Oh, yeah.
that hopefully we'll get that space occupied and filled here. But it's coming forward. It's for the outdoor seating, and that would be for outdoor seating and the allowance for alcohol.
I have a question there. This is not a case for PC Pinion. This is, what's coming before us is a director's exemption?
Correct. I'm kicking it up to
Have you
planning
decided
commission.
then to provide a director's exemption for certain parts of the applicant's request and
Yes.
kick the rest to the planning commission?
Yeah, without going into a lot of detail, there is a DE that's out for it right now for the interior portions, and this is to cover the exterior portions that's going before
Okay.
the commission. There's a report that'll be coming out by the end of this week, so we'll get a chance to
Right,
dive into it
right,
next week.
because the next meeting is a week hence.
Yep,
Right.
we've got a week. We're meeting again, same time, same bat channel here in a week. So looking forward to that. The general plan update will have information and an update to the general plan, as we will have for every meeting. Sometimes there's a lot to spill out in terms of an update, and sometimes it's just a little
And
bit.
what was the timeline for getting comments back from HCD on the housing element? Was that 90 days?
No, it's 60.
60 days?
At
So-
one point, there was an understanding that it was 90 days, but it's 60.
So
And we're
that's
looking
60
to have.
from around the end of July sometime.
Yeah, we submitted it on July 20th.
July 20th,
So
okay.
we're expecting comments back by September 20th.
So by our October 6th meeting, we should have, we would hope, some comments from HCD.
All right, we can dive into those comments.
We can look at scheduling maybe a further review of the housing element here before City Council. I guess City Council hasn't taken it up yet.
Yeah. Is there a portion where I can talk about those things? Not necessarily on the tentative agenda, but do we have, I want to make sure that I'm covering. Sorry here, hold on. Consent, informational. Commission member reports, can we hold that off to then?
Sure.
To talk that through? Okay.
Sure,
Good.
okay.
So that's the general plan update. I know you're wanting to get into that discussion based on the general plan update, but from the tentative agenda, then we lean into the first meeting in October, which, if you're seeing here, we've already got two items that I just mentioned, and the commission just voted on pushing an item to October 6th.
Right.
So one of these items are likely to drop off, and I have a strong feeling it's going to be the rooftop wireless facility. that'll just get pushed to the second meeting in
Oh,
October.
2 West Ojai, that's the AT&T central office?
Yeah, the challenge with that is we have something referred to as a shot clock, where we've got to meet a certain deadline by state and federal requirements for the
This is
item
like
to
a
be heard.
speedy trial kind of thing? If we don't do something, then it's approved?
If we don't do something, we lose. And I think Nikhil can speak to this as well. But we lose some of our rights in terms of how we can address it. So it's important that it. But I've looked at our timeline. We've been very aggressive about getting responses back and stopping that shot clock. But it's important that it be heard and considered and given that time for a public hearing.
To maintain the city's discretionary authority, we need to.
Discretionary, thank you, discretionary
Yes.
authority. So
So
I'm just
that-
trying to make sure that we're staying within that shot clock. I
That
think
might slip to October 20th, but that's still okay?
that's still okay. I was looking at potentially having it in September. Pushing it off that far is still okay, but I think by that point, it becomes a priority.
Okay. Any other questions for staff on future agenda items? All right, let's go to commission member reports. Anything of interest to the rest of the commission that you want to bring up? Okay. And our city council liaison, as I mentioned earlier, is tied up in another meeting. I presume he'll be back with us next week.
Yeah, that's the
And
understanding.
unless there's any other business pending before the commission, tell me if there is.
Well, I was going to provide an update during the commission member report
Very good, let's do that.
to I think it really is the housing element piece. So just so that the entire commission is aware, we sent off the draft housing element to HCD, and that was on July 20th. And so there's a 60-day window where they're going to respond and provide us comments.
Actually,
and we've
September
heard-
18th, yes.
Yep, we've heard officially that it's September 20th, but we've been bugging them every week, wondering if it could be sooner. Because in previous cycles, it's been in the range of 45 days. But we're hearing that in no way is it going to be sooner than that. So unfortunately, we're not going to get it quicker, but it doesn't hurt to still ask the question. So we're looking forward to seeing that come into our
Just be politely persistent.
and so we can start looking at that closer. In the interim, there is a schedule for us to and when I say us, I mean for the council to start looking at the housing element, leaning into this October 15th deadline, so that we're still on track to meet that October 15th deadline.
The final submission to HCD has to be by October 15th.
Yes, that's what we want. There's this extension of 120 days, but I'm not, when I say I mean staff is not, and I presume the council and I think the commission as well, in terms of being how diligent we were moving forward. We don't want to go 120 days out. We want to get this addressed and then take another look at it in the future and start looking at some of those policy aspects and
Well, that-
some other bits and pieces.
Do we need another special meeting in between as soon as we get this from HCD? Because October 6th looks pretty full. And the next meeting is October 20th,
Yeah, so
on that deadline for submission of the final
right.
housing element.
The commission at this point has provided a recommendation. If there's changes that require some sort of sequel review, and if you recall correctly, we also have an addendum that's currently being worked on by our CEQA consultant. So they're working on a draft. We'll be reviewing it shortly. The likelihood of it coming back to commission before it goes to council is not, I mean, it's a possibility, but if it is, it'll probably be a special meeting, more than likely.
Well, a special meeting a week before we get the Rancho Inn And the El Roblar would be, that's what, the 29th of September.
Mm-hmm.
So we might keep that in mind if that's available time.
And just
For
be aware that
commissioners.
we're working on a very tight timeline, and we're working through the most effective way that this can potentially be brought forward for council consideration. So whether or not this commission sees this item before council makes a determination, it all depends on what happens with the comments, I would say, to a certain degree as well. If we're completely off the mark with this housing element, then there's a lot more work to be done.
Then we all have a lot of meetings.
Yeah. I don't anticipate that to be completely fair in terms of our analysis, in terms of what we've done. The consultant has been very thorough in terms of checking those boxes. So I don't anticipate that, but I don't know. It's kind of a shooting
Never
darts
know.
at this point. We'll see.
Okay, well, as far as Wednesdays, the 22nd and 29th of September are Wednesdays,
Okay.
and we might consider those if we need to have another meeting
Yeah, and
because of extensive comments from HCD.
right. So there'll be more information, I think, is probably
And if
It's
it's
probably
just errata or minor comments, maybe we could take it up on October 6th.
yeah,
Do you
there.
expect that city council is going to take it up before October 6th?
Oh yes, yeah. We have a fairly aggressive schedule for them to take it up potentially 3 times before the 15th.
Okay, because as we talked about it before, we would get another shot at the housing element if necessary before council approved a final report.
Correct.
And I think
Here-
all of us would like to see it before they decide that
There's-
whatever is on paper is the final word.
Right, and there's a lot of different scenarios that could play out in terms of whether the commission gets another crack at it. I mean, the reality is that the commission's going to potentially get more than one crack at it based on the general plan update that we're currently working on. So just because this one's getting buttoned up, we still have the full EIR that's going to be required for this.
And as Nikhil
not only for
mentioned
this, but-
earlier, we can continue to make changes to the housing element and other elements of the general plan,
Absolutely.
even after October 15th. We
Even
just
after
have to
October 15th.
resubmit to HCD.
Yeah, and there's 2 ways in which that happens. If it's a larger piece and they want to see it and they want to look at it, then it's independent. But there's also this annual APR, annual progress report, that's required for us to send off to HCD. And that's typically just the numbers, but if there's modifications that we've made to the general plan, they absolutely want to know what those are,
Okay?
especially if it's housing element related.
Okay. So it sounds like we'll have whatever opportunities we want in terms of modifying the housing element and potentially other elements of the general plan.
Yeah, this timeline is really just tightened up extensively.
I remember back in the spring, you said October 15th is the deadline and it's coming quicker than you thought. It's certainly coming quicker than I thought.
Yeah, I remember the first conversation we had in May. I was like, it's in October, but it seems like it's a long ways away, but it's really not that far. And yet here we are, just about 45 days out, less than 45 days out. And
Yeah.
it's the review with HCD that really kind of throws everything, a wrench in everything. So, but it's part of the process.
Okay. Any last go-round for commissioners? Anything you want to bring up?
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes,
I think
sir.
this is more for Lucas and kind of piggybacks on Bill Miley's comment around parking. Do we know when we had our last parking analysis for Ojai? Do you have a general idea on that? Is that something part of the general
I
plan?
thought it was 1992. Yeah.
I think it's
92.
92.
Okay, is there any idea or thought around doing a new one?
Okay, so 2006. 92 was one of
2006,
the
okay.
initial ones.
2006. Okay.
91 was the first one, and then 2006 was the second.
Okay.
So 15-year intervals, so
We're right in that
arguably about
sweet
time to
spot.
do it again.
Well, perhaps.
Okay.
What's
Okay?
the John, or sorry,
Yeah.
Commissioner Trent? Is there? Sorry,
No worries.
Is there some sort of, is there something beyond what I know Mr. Miley was talking about earlier? Is there something you're looking at there or concern that you're?
No, I think in general, looking at the two projects that we're going to be talking about on October 6th, and some of the conversations that we've had in the past, parking is always an issue, and I've never heard anybody say that we don't have parking issues in Ojai, and I've never heard people say that traffic in Ojai is not a problem. So I was just curious if we had some sort of structure around that, when the next one might be, to see if things have changed since 2006, because I have a strong feeling that there's a higher demand for traffic in downtown Ojai, and I'm just curious if we can take a look at it again.
Yeah.
It would be good
Cool.
to have updated data for sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Things change.
And I think that when we end up looking at the parking ordinance, that I'm kind of anticipating that we'll broaden out our discussion. I think we really need to look at the whole, many aspects of parking throughout Ojai. So.
Well, I think parking is certainly an issue that's worth talking about, because it comes up all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Cool. Thank you.
absent any other business before the commission? Oh, here we come with another speaker card.
Bill Nye, thank you. Commissioner Trent's comment about parking led me to mention this. I find that the noise problem down Ojai Avenue, for me anyway, at times is overwhelmingly disturbing. I think that the restaurants and such are doing a wonderful job to serve patrons in spite of what occurs. And it's probably not the medium or average noise level from vehicles going back and forth, but it's the, on occasion, motorcycles that are running their engines up with mufflers that seem to be empty inside. And this is an overwhelmingly challenging issue that probably can't be solved. But I would like to see something like, maybe a comic book thing. Going into Ojai, it says, we value our sound environment. Please, we would like you to have mufflers that are legal. We would like you to not run your engines high as you're going through town. Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And at the bottom it says, we really care, and at times we enforce this. So I would like to see that considered maybe a community group, Chamber of Commerce, so that motorcycles and pickup trucks that have loud mufflers, and I'm sitting at the intersection of Signal and Ojai to go north on Signal, and there's this huge sound coming down Ojai Avenue, and it's an old pickup truck with a muffler that doesn't work, probably intentionally. And I think that the merchants in this town shouldn't have to suffer, and the patrons shouldn't have to suffer. And they're sitting outside having to talk loud because of the noise on the highway. That is an insult to humanity, I believe. And I think I would like to see if legally we could do something about that in a soft, gradual way over a couple of years, so that we're known as a quiet community. Thank you. Anyway, that's one of my real big problems.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Just a quick comment on that. We do have a noise ordinance, correct?
Yes,
Does that apply to cars as well?
it applies to everything as far as I know.
Correct. It does. The vehicles, though, it's a little bit more difficult to address.
Moving target, literally.
True.
Yeah, tough to enforce that one.
And of course,
I was just
for
curious.
the riders, half the fun is the noise that you make.
Yeah, whether it's a motorcycle or a beefed up car.
Yep, yep. Okay, well, absent any further business before the commission, at 7:09, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.